Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. All right, everyone, welcome to this episode of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. This is one years in the making. I'm really happy to have Brian Manning here. Brian been a consular officer, asylum officer, and now in private practice, and he's got a great background, so it's like a treat to have him here to just kind of pick his brain to see what he's been through. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, John. Glad to be with you, man.
Oh, awesome. So yeah, break down, where'd you grow up and how'd you become a lawyer?
So I'm from the Oklahoma City area originally, and I went to college there as well at Oklahoma State University. I actually went to law school in Minnesota, kind of a long story. But I think I didn't really know what I wanted to do or be after, at the end of undergrad. So I was like, oh, why not go to law school? Probably a mistake in retrospect to go straight from undergrad to law school. I think I would have done better had I been a bit more mature and had some real world experience. But during law school, I guess I still didn't know sort of what I wanted to do near the end of law school. And I had traveled some and studied abroad a few times and stuff. And I liked that. And so I was trying to figure out a way to do some more of that. And so I did an internship during law school with the State Department at the U.S. Embassy in Uzbekistan, and it was fun. I liked it a lot. So, yeah, they do internships. You can do them both at what they call main state, like the headquarters in D.C., or at embassies and consulates. Yeah, so Uzbekistan.
And did you have to learn the language?
No, like I at that point I spoke some Russian. Okay, so and then that's one of the languages that's widely spoken there. So I used that. But I didn't relate to do the internship.
Do they speak Farsi in Uzbekistan?
There is a Persian population, so it's spoken there, but it's not a predominant language. There's more Tajiks, which I guess is close to Farsi. I think the language, but I think there are Farsi speakers, but it's like a minority. Yeah. Uzbek there's a language called Uzbek that's the main language, and then Russian is the second language.
Interesting. Is that a busy consulate?
No, not really.
How'd you get chosen out of all of them for internship? How did they put you there?
Yeah, well, I actually asked for it. So I had studied 3 times in Russia throughout undergrad and law school, twice in undergrad, once in law school. Mm-hmm. And I spent a month in Ukraine once, and I minored in Russian. So I wanted to go someplace where I could sort of practice the Russian, but that was different sort of socially and culturally than where I had studied in Eastern Europe. Yeah, so I wanted to do one the stands that Russian was spoken in. So I chose it.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. So after that, at the end of law school, I started applying for government jobs sort of in the foreign affairs realm. And then I was waiting for one of them to come through because it takes a long time, right, for the processing and the security, the background checks and stuff. Yeah. And so security clearance. So my loans, student loans were about to go into repayment. So I was like, I better get a job. So I practiced for a year back in Oklahoma, where I'm originally from, just kind of business litigation, employment law stuff. And it was fine, but I wanted to get overseas. So I finally got a job with the State Department. So I was diplomat for 8.5 years. And so, all the diplomats, American diplomats have to do some of the visa work, the consular work. So I did some of that, which I liked. I didn't take immigration law in law school or anything. I had no exposure to consular training. But I liked it. I liked learning about immigration law. I liked being a consular officer pretty well. It can be a bit of a grind. I was in low volume places doing it, so it wasn't that hard for me. But I like the subject matter. So so even back then I had thought, okay, maybe someday I'll want to do immigration law.
Which one were you?
Where was I? I was in Cone, econ, economics. So my Cone was econ, but it turned out that I did only 1 year of econ. Mm-hmm. I did a little over a year of consular, a year of econ, and then I did 4 years of political, which is similar to econ, actually. Same kind of things that you're doing, job functions that you're doing, which is to say a lot of reporting where, you're sort of like meeting with contacts and trying to analyze what's going on in the country that's of interest to, U.S. policymakers, and you're writing about it and trying to implement foreign policy. So political and political and econ are kind of similar job functions in the department. So my wife and I, when I went into it, we were newly married. And so the first couple of years, it was like amazing because we'd been married like 9 months and we were in Croatia. So like, that's awesome. And, every month we were going to like a new European country, but we thought like, okay, we'll just do it for a couple of years and then I'll probably quit and, maybe go back to Oklahoma or something. But it's like it's a pretty awesome job. So you can get sucked in.
Let's walk through it. So first you went to Croatia?
Yeah, Croatia, and then Chile, and then Bulgaria. But for all three of those, I had language training before going out to those. So I spent chunks of time in DC for that and for functional job training before all three occasions. That was cumulatively like 2 years of my 8.5 years were spent in the DC area for training.
How hard is it to retain Bulgarian and Croatian?
It's hard. I don't retain any of it now. Like, I'm not one of those people that can have more than one foreign language on my mind. So I've kind of worked the Spanish back up because I'm in Houston, so I'm getting a chance to use it. And I actually took advantage of a DHS kind of continuing education program where they paid for me to do some Berlitz refresher language training, so that was cool. But no, man, I can't summon hardly anything in Russian, Croatian, or Bulgarian now.
And then like Chilean Spanish is like sped up version of Spanish, isn't it? Is it hard adjusting it or not really?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. As I understand it, it's one of the tougher accents to get, like with Cubans, they say, are difficult. Yeah, it's a little bit tough. There's a lot of slang, and like they just kind of eat some of the sounds that they're supposed to make. It's a little bit tough, but yeah.
Well, cool. So
at the end, go ahead.
Your consular experiences. So in the first one in Croatia, I'm guessing they only have an embassy, no consulate, right?
Correct.
And did you do IV work, NIV work, or both?
Both. Mostly NIV, but both. And it was a smattering of everything. But I mean, it's a low volume post. Like, it's not like, Shanghai or Mexico City or, anywhere in India. So it's like, it's pretty easy as far as consular goes. But I did get to see the fairly broad range, the spectrum of classifications, both NIV and IV.
What were the kind of cases that came up in Croatia?
The interesting ones were that there were a lot of like tech, and there were a lot of people coming on like B1 in lieu of H1B. So for example, like Croatia is a pretty highly educated society. So there's a lot of guys there that are getting hired by like Siemens to come to the US to go work at the Volkswagen plant in Tennessee, stuff like that, that are going to go work, install the conveyor belt system or whatever it is. So there was like B1 in lieu of H1Bs that were kind of interesting. There were some athletes, actually. There was Ivan Ljubčić. I had a really interesting case with him. He was a pretty decent player. He came and he actually won. I gave him the visa that he came on to win the one of the majors, like the Indian Wells or something. I don't know if you follow tennis, but one of the big tournaments in Florida that he won after I gave him a B visa that was called into question whether that was appropriate, because there was like some de minimis amount of guaranteed money.
Yeah.
So the question was whether that, like under the FAM as it existed at that time, like that technically could have like made it inappropriate for him to get a B visa. So like there was this big back and forth with consular affairs, in Washington about this. And eventually, I wanted to get him the visa because I thought it was ridiculous to, make him like try to petition for something that was probably not going to happen in time. So thankfully we got the okay to give him that visa, and he ended up winning the tournament and winning, I don't know, like $1 million, winning some serious money for a major tennis tournament.
You just talked about two things that as practitioners drives us crazy. One is the B1 in lieu of H. It's kind of one of those things that some people, it's like a unicorn. They've heard of it. Like I know in Germany, they're more lenient on that. It seems like Croatia, they are. What were your standards on that? How strict were you? And what was the training on that? Just fill us in on the B1 in lieu of H. A lot of people might not know even exists.
Yeah, I don't know if there was any training on it. have a specific memory of getting instruction about it when we were in what they call congen, the consular training that you go through before you go out to pose. I think it was something that I hadn't heard of until someone like applied for it, and I was like, oh, I got to figure this out. Yeah, it's probably one of those things that in places like Germany, where there's a lot of business visas, you probably see a lot of it, but it's going to be the case probably that you're going to find consular officers elsewhere who have no idea what it is and are seeing it for the first time. And I don't recall that any of the companies that were sending people like Siemens and some of these other, major multinationals that everyone's heard of, like I don't recall that they did a particularly good job of educating me, with some kind of cover letter or something that was like, here's how this works and here's why the guy qualifies for a visa.
Would you have been open to someone giving you a cover letter?
Would I have been what?
Officers don't like that. Would you have been open to someone give you an educational?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would appreciate it. Like, I mean, not for like just a garden variety tourist visa, but for something that like a B1 in lieu of H, like, yeah, like a 1-2 page max cover letter that is not like pushy in tone, but rather it's just like where you sort of evince that you're trying to be helpful just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Yeah, that to my mind, that's helpful because, one thing I was with the government 11 years until 2 weeks ago. And, that's one thing that I really became convinced of is that it's like half the battle is making the person's job easy. Make the decision maker's job as easy as possible and give them the road map to take you where you want to go. And in the case of a B1 in lieu of H visa, it's one of those instances where like they might not be that familiar with it. And if you just show them where to go in a, sort of non-confrontational way, it's helpful. And that, I mentioned a couple times things to the effect of like the tone matters, especially with the State Department, I think, because you know how it is with the State Department. They're standoffish. They feel like they can just be like, I don't care. I don't have to deal with you lawyers. I don't care what you say. It's different from USCIS, where if you're at a USCIS office, you can just be like, I want to talk to your supervisor. And like, you will. Like, it's like, it's like you can actually like sort of engage. But State Department's obviously, it's a different mentality, with just non-reviewability and just the culture is very different. So I think you got to be especially careful and in dealing with the State Department and presented as, oh, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and, thought this might be helpful to get this across to you.
Yeah. So would that be kind of like citing the FAM section and then kind of doing like a factual analysis, like IRAC kind of thing? Like,
yeah, in a very cover letter kind of way, not a legal brief kind of way. And I feel the same way about at least the asylum office at USCIS. I'm not sure about field offices, but I think you do yourself a disservice by like presenting something that looks like a brief that you're going to file in federal court. Like at the asylum office, people would send things that like, had the heading, I don't even know what you call it, but it looks like a brief. And it's like, now comes petitioner. And you're like, whoa, like this is weird. Like, this is just weird. I think it's intimidating for a lot of officers. So, but to your point, to your question, a modified act that feels less formal than a brief and less formal than maybe an IRAC outline.
Yeah.
But that cites to the FAM. I would never cite probably any case law, especially with the State Department. But just because like they don't really care. But yeah, the main point is that I do think that for cases that are anything other than a garden variety tourist visa, that a cover letter that in less than 2 pages, not more than 2 pages, tells them what's going on and why your person qualifies, is worth doing.
Perfect. And for the situation where someone's coming in for a athletic event on a B, were they kind of pushing you back and saying they should have gotten 01 for that, or P maybe, or something like that?
Yeah, I think isn't P usually the standard for like tennis? I think it is.
I think so. I don't think that's what it was. So, but it's one of those. Yeah.
for competitions. Yeah, I think the P was what local leadership there in Zagreb thought might have been appropriate, and some people in Washington thought so too. And so it led to like this big discussion about it that was, kind of ended up being kind of.
Was that before the issuance? So they told them like administrative processing will let you know.
Yeah. He got put into what they call 221G administrative processing, which it's something that I've thought about a lot lately when I listen to podcasts and hear lawyers talk about administrative processing. Is that it seems like the assumption, at least now recently, is that administrative processing always means like security checks or background checks or something, but it's not. Like at least the State Department uses that term to mean any time that like an application is still pending and is not yet approvable. Like they might need documents from you, they might need time to research it, whatever. Yeah, that also is administrative processing.
I was on one of these Facebook groups, and someone, I think he's a newer attorney, but he had a case that was denied at the embassy, and he wants to do a motion to reopen, and he's asking like, who do we send it to? How do there's no motion to reopen for the embassy. It's really just an informal letter at most. I told him we could contact the consular office, email them, and ask them to reconsider. But is there any formal motion to reopen that we could do if there was a refusal or something like that, or denial?
No, there's no motion. There's no process. Like there's no formal process. So there's no like corresponding, motion that you can make to do it. But sometimes it does work to just send an email or to find the right person to get to. And, there's different theories about how best to do that. And like, when I'm in private practice now, I'll have to sort of figure out how best to do it, but I have some ideas about it from when I was a consular officer, because I did see that it did happen sometimes that people would get in touch, by email or find a way to get through by calling, which I have some ideas about how to do. And just be like, I just think there might have been a misunderstanding with this that I was hoping I might be able to clear up if I could just talk to you for 5 minutes or just send you a one-pager that explains a couple things. It does work sometimes.
Yeah. No, that's going to happen. It really just depends on the person on the other side you're dealing with, but it's worth a shot to informally just try to reach out and say, hey, let's work with each other on that.
Yeah. There's no downside. There's no risk to it.
Yeah, exactly. So you're in Croatia. That sounds like a great time. You probably beautiful place, like architecture kind of stuff. Yeah. And you made this.
Yeah, the architecture's not amazing, but I mean overall it's a.
Is it one of those older cities that's like I'm probably thinking about like I don't know Vienna or something like that, Austria.
I mean there's a small kind of like old historic section of like the Zagreb that's quaint like that and nice. Yeah.
Is Croatia one of those places in between that historically, whenever there was wars with big countries, that would be the one that would get crushed with the moving through or something like I guess Albania or something like that or something?
I mean they've had a rough go of it at various times in history. As like part of with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then as part of Yugoslavia. They've had a pretty tough history.
So you went from Croatia to Bulgaria.
To Chile, actually.
Oh, Chile first. Okay, so you just hopped around. So Chile, let's see. Chile's got the H-1B one. Is that correct? They got that trade special H-1B that Chilean has or something like that? I know there's something special for Chile, but I don't know what it is. I didn't. Yeah, so I didn't really do. I only did a month of consular work there, which is kind of like a rotation thing. I was doing mainly political work there. Oh, interesting. Okay. Could you talk about that, or is that like top secret?
No, I mean, so both in Chile and Bulgaria, I was in what they call the political section, but within that, you have the different officers have different portfolios, right? Things that you're like mainly focused on. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my stuff, both in Chile and Bulgaria, was related to law. So like trying to help them do better in terms of like their justice system, their security apparatus, stuff like that. And a lot of it's being sort of a liaison between those elements with them and like those elements with us in the United States, and like trying to find ways that we can help train Chile and Bulgaria to do certain things better, but also just cooperation at, in that sphere in general. So like rule of law stuff, but also I had like what they call the political military portfolio, where I was kind of the guy who in Chile who was kind of like the civilian point of contact at the embassy. So I worked a lot for like military related stuff. And so I worked a lot with our military people there at the embassy, and also with Chile's military people and Chile's like foreign ministry, the people there that were also doing military related stuff. So I got to do some fun stuff.
You mentioned this rule of law stuff. Is it similar to the stuff going on that happened with Trump in Ukraine, saying they're trying to like take away corruption and teach them how to do that,
Yep.
that kind of stuff?
Yep, exactly. I dealt with like the programs that were held up. Like I dealt with that with those programs. I helped administer some of these accounts where the U.S. government says, okay, we've got certain pots of money to be used for certain things in these countries. So I was like one of the guys who was in charge of like sort of helping to come up with a plan for how to use it, assessing, okay, what does Bulgaria need in rule of law, and how can we help them get it, and what money should be going to it, and then are they carrying it out? Like I would, be doing sort of, reporting on and checks of like, how's it going? How's this money being spent?
How effective is it giving money out like this to these countries? Like, I don't believe the government should. I personally, we shouldn't be involved in that kind of stuff because I think it's probably a waste. But did you see you're on the ground? Like, did you see it have any effect really, or?
Yeah, I think it's meaningful. There's plenty of, there is some waste and there's money that isn't well spent, but on balance, yeah, I think that our foreign assistance, including for things like, rule of law and like security assistance, stuff like that, makes a difference both in terms of, actually making things better in the country, but also it's symbolically important to these countries to like, to have the support of the United States as they're dealing with these challenges. I mean, it was massively important in Ukraine because of their issues with Russia. It's like that they really needed the support of the U.S. And when we're withholding it, it's like, well, what's the deal? What's our relationship? What's the situation now? Why is this happening?
In Croatia and Bulgaria, was the threat of Russia part of our policy there, or not as much as like Ukraine would be?
Russia wasn't really a thing in Croatia. It's a big thing in Bulgaria. Not like worried about like them invading like they did Ukraine, but there is significant malign Russian influence in Bulgaria. Russia plays a significant role in Bulgarian corruption, and just bad stuff going on in Bulgaria that Russia has a lot to do with. So Russia's important to Bulgaria.
Interesting. So let's transition from Chile to Bulgaria. I think I did a Macedonian case, not Macedonia, like Montenegro or something, and they didn't have an embassy, so they have to go to Bulgaria, I think, to do the IV. Was it something like that? Like nearby countries have to go there because it's bigger?
John, it cut out for a second there.
Oh, sorry.
Last thing I heard was, did nearby countries have to go there?
Yeah, no, I had a case in Montenegro, and they wouldn't do immigrant visa processing there because the country was too small. And I think they sent them to Bulgaria, but it might have been to Serbia or something like that. But how was your time in Bulgaria? What kind of consular processing would you do there, and what kind of things did you see?
Bulgaria is great. First of all, it's a super nice place to live, especially as an expat. I didn't do any consular work in Bulgaria. It was just in the police section, mainly in like rule of law, like anti-corruption, judicial system type stuff. But Bulgaria is great, man. It's a pretty country. There's mountains. Like actually, like lots of Europeans, like Brits and stuff, come there to go snow skiing. There's decent sized mountains for skiing. It's super cheap, but it's kind of in the middle between being a sort of a developed country and being still very much a part of like Southeast Europe. So that's kind of interesting. It's cheap, but there's still all the nice Western amenities you could want. So it's cool. It's right by Greece. We went to Greece all the time from there. It was amazing.
Awesome. And how was the feeling of safety in Bulgaria, being a U.S. officer in the sense? Was there any issues, or did you have to like walk around security?
No,
Bulgaria's not a dangerous place, but
yeah, no. I mean, yeah, I had colleagues in the State Department where in places where that's definitely a major concern, but no, the places that I was were all like super safe. And there is in the back of your mind, no matter where you are, that thought of like, yeah, I could be a target because of where I work, even in a safe place. That does happen sometimes in one-off situations, but overall, Bulgaria is like super safe.
Interesting. And so that was the final embassy you were at, and you made the transition back to the U.S. What year was this when you transitioned back?
Summer of 2017. So I was at the State Department for 8.5 years. My wife and I kind of finally decided that we just kind of wanted to put down roots, have some stability, and more than anything, we wanted our kids to like grow up seeing our families more, being around our families more. And our families are both in the Oklahoma City area. So we wanted to be in a large, diverse city that was driving distance to Oklahoma, and that's why we chose Houston.
Did you have your kids when you were in Europe?
In Bulgaria, yeah. So they're both my kids are adopted, and we adopted them while we were in Chile from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Oh, wow. So that was a long trip, a couple times. Yeah. And so we adopted them. We're in Chile for a few months with them, then in the DC area for training before Bulgaria, and then Bulgaria for 2 years, and then to Houston.
Well, let's talk about the technical aspects of adoption and immigration. Did you have to go do the adoption and do you do I-1? I've never done adoption, but I know it's a whole thing. Is it an I-130 you do, or what do you do for adoption?
Oh man, so let's see. It's an
immigration attorney, or did you do it yourself?
No, I did it myself, and I mean, I spent a lot of time looking into it. It's involved.
Democratic Congo a Hague Convention country, or that's the stuff I remember is Hague Convention or something.
Right. Yeah, there are these Hague Convention countries that have certain rules that apply to them. There's implications for that on U.S. immigration because of that. So my kids are adopted from a country that's not a Hague country, and one major difference is that when we adopted them, because my wife and I had not seen them in person before they were adopted to us under the laws of the Democratic Republic of Congo, they got, I think it's an IR4. It's the one that when they enter the United States, upon admission, they become LPRs, but they do not become citizens by operation of law. As where if you're adopting under a circumstance where you did see them before they're adopted to you under the foreign country's laws, you get like an IR3 visa for like adoptions. And when that happens, when they're admitted in the U.S., they become citizens by operation of law. Ours didn't, but rather became citizens upon being adopted under the laws of any state in the U.S. So when we got here, we adopted them a couple of weeks later under the laws of Oklahoma, where we were like originally from. And then as soon as that happens, they become citizens by operation of law. So we were able to get passports, at that time, both diplomatic and regular right away. Yeah. But then actually just recently I got certificates of citizenship for them.
Did you get the N600s? Because a lot of people don't want to do that.
Yeah, just recently. I got them like a few months ago.
How long did the process take to get them in the N600?
Oh, I don't know. It wasn't that long. It was like 6 months or something.
Okay. Because I got to file one soon, and 6 months is the time. I want to see if they're faster or slower about it.
But it was an ordeal dealing with USCIS. Yeah. They sent when we first came with them to the United States. They messed up one of the green cards. Like they had the wrong kid's picture on there, and the name was spelled. And then the N600, it was just a hassle. Like what was the deal? They wouldn't. They had a hard time understanding the situation, like why they qualified for a certificate of citizenship and that they were actually already citizens. And
claiming their kids are already citizens and they don't need to. What was the claim? So to clarify,
USCIS it seemed that they weren't sure at first that my kids qualified for an N600, which you have to be a citizen to get it. It's like you already have to be a citizen. That's just proof that you are a citizen.
Yeah.
And they like it wasn't clear to them that was the case because of the adoption like situation. And then like they wouldn't schedule my kids for the same time or the same day to come in for like you have to have an interview with my like 6 or 5-year-olds. They wouldn't, they couldn't get them to schedule them on the same day. It's like just dealing with it was difficult. And this is while I was working at the asylum office across town in Houston.
Which field office would you have gone to? Just another Houston field office?
The Houston one, yeah. There's one office in Houston.
Interesting. For a USCIS officer to say the other officer, it just goes to show like how much it's hard. I mean, I'm starting, like, I've been going to interviews. I went to a marriage interview the other week, and the officer was so cool and so nice. I got to give it to USCIS officers. They go through a lot of hell. There's some crappy ones really, but I think the vast majority are good. They're dealing with like big obstacles just in their way to be able to do a good job. So, it's annoying that they wouldn't set that up, but scheduling a lot of times happens from a service center or something like that. It's like the whole system is just like, it's bonkers. So it makes it really hard for the individuals to even work with in that.
Yeah, the environment is tough. I mean, especially, I haven't worked at a field office or a service center, but at the asylum office, like, it's tough. I meing, being an asylum officer is a hard job. The working conditions are not good. The workload is very significant. There's never any permanent, or there's not permanent leadership at DHS. The morale is pretty low. There's a lot of issues.
So let's talk about the transition. So what made you want to go into, the asylum officer of all the USCIS DHS positions that were open to you?
I was feeling at the end of my time with the State Department that I might someday want to get into immigration law, like in private practice, but also I like the idea of, wanting to learn more about immigration law, and I like the humanitarian aspect that came with it, and the international dimension that there is to asylum. So it seemed like a pretty good fit after coming from the State Department and in light of my interests.
Mm-hmm. And so you went to how was the training to become an asylum officer?
It's actually really good. So I have there are a lot of things that I think USCIS should improve a lot on. However, one thing I think USCIS does really well is training. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the working conditions and the people doing the work aren't equipped in other ways to do the job that well, but usually it's, in my opinion, not for lack of training. The training was excellent. It's like a 6-week course out at this place in the state of Georgia where all of like the DHS law enforcement go. It's called the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And it's basically like a master's level education in refugee and asylum law crammed into, like 6 weeks. Then also you get at the asylum office, and for refugee officers as well, every single week you get like 3 hours worth of like continuing sort of education type training, which is cool. So yeah, the training is really good. It was super interesting. It was well presented. I give USCIS credit for giving good training.
Were all the your fellow officers at the Houston asylum office, were they all attorneys as well?
Oh no, I think that historically, like if you were looked at the Asylum Core 5 years ago, it would have been like maybe half of them had JDs. Mm-hmm. Less so now. Like they've been on this like hiring spree the last year and a half or so, and I think it's even fewer and fewer have JDs.
Interesting. So what kind of cases happen in Houston area? What kind of asylum cases pop up over there?
I mean, there's, Houston's one of the most diverse cities in the U.S., by some accounts the most. And so there are populations from all over the world, that come here. So you do see a little bit of everything, but each asylum office, there's like 8, I think, core offices, and then a couple what they call sub offices. Each of them kind of has their own, populations that they see more of just because of migration patterns and where people settle based on their families or whatever. So being where we are, we did see a lot of Central Americans. And so, people that have come up across the border But there's also a pretty big African diaspora here, like a lot of Nigerians, quite a few Vietnamese, a good number of Chinese. You see a lot more Chinese, like in San Francisco and New York. Those asylum offices have a large percentage of their caseload is Chinese. For us, it's more Central American, and then just kind of a mix of a lot of other stuff.
With the border crisis, would they ever send you to the border to do credible fear interviews and stuff? I heard they were sending asylum officers there and stuff. But that, am I mistaken?
Yeah. So I did hundreds, if not thousands, of credible fear interviews, but I did them all telephonically.
I see.
So they do send people, asylum officers, to the border, but that's like basically, as far as I can tell, so they can check a box that the administration is saying, oh, we're sending more people to the border. Like, it doesn't matter whether the person's physically at the border or doing it over the phone. For credible fear, it really doesn't matter. An affirmative asylum interview, really person, but credible fear, not so much. So I never actually went to the border. I had colleagues that did, but I did many credible fear interviews on the phone.
Either on the phone or in person, did you ever feel like the people were coached or into that fact?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt that many of them are, in my opinion. Because you do hear some of the exact same boilerplate stories from the that are unique to a population.
Yeah.
The Chinese have one or two stories that they tell. Indians have one or two stories that they tell, and so on. So yeah, you do feel like some of them are coached. I don't know, probably not often by lawyers. I think it just goes around the detention facilities of here's a winning story, which is unfortunate because that story that gets parroted is true for some people. So you never really know when you're hearing it whether it's true for that guy or not. So it does them a disservice. It's hard to tell. The credible fear interviews are short, especially at the time that I was doing them. It was usually like 45 minutes, an hour. They've gotten longer now because of what I would consider the pressure from the administration to give more negatives, say no more often. But they're still short, and so you don't go that deep in these things. It's supposed to be a very much a threshold screening where it's like basically based on what they're telling me, if this stuff is true, would it give them like some minimal chance of making a case for asylum or like withholding or protection under the Convention Against Torture if they were given a full hearing in immigration court?
I see. So now I've been filed an asylum case in like 8 years, but what kind of tips would you get to practitioners submitting that the way you like to see it or would help you do it better?
Yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts on this because, the whole time I was an asylum officer, I was seeing like work product from attorneys and thinking about how, I would do it if I were an attorney. So I have thoughts on that. And part of it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, that I see the attorney's job as making the officer's life easy. And one way you do that is explaining why your client is qualified for asylum. So it was actually shocking to me as an asylum officer that most lawyers didn't submit any kind of like cover letter or brief or anything saying, here's what happened and here's why this qualifies them for asylum. They literally just help the person like fill out the application, the I-589, and maybe help them prepare like a personal statement or narrative that is like an addendum to the application. But they didn't make any argument. Like they didn't explain to me why the person gets asylum. And that's, to me, that's like negligence or malpractice to not, as their lawyer, that they're paying you to help them, to not explain why your client is entitled to this benefit. So the major pointer is do submit something that explains that. I recommend not styling it as like a brief and focusing on trying to make it readable, easy to consume for someone who's not a lawyer, because many of the officers are not lawyers. Don't have a heavy-handed, argumentative approach. Like you would see people that were just like, when they did make arguments, or that would like correspond with us, that would be just like very forceful, like, I demand, that you review this, and like you're like, whoa, no, that's you don't do that.
Sure, yeah.
So do prepare something, do advocate. Take great care in the way that you present the application and the supporting materials. So, for example, a lot of lawyers will just, to support your asylum claim, it's often helpful to present what we would call country of origin information, which is basically reports, from NGOs or from the U.S. government, like State Department Human Rights Report, or whatever, newspaper articles that sort of support your claim that like this thing is happening and therefore it's likely to happen to me, right? And so lawyers would submit like the State Department Human Rights Report, but they would just print out the whole thing and just put it underneath the application, and that's it. Like there is no way an asylum officer is going to like read through the whole human rights report that you've just put on there without pointing me to the relevant parts. So like you need to, in your cover letter, have like at the back of it, or at the top or at the front of it, either way, have, like an appendix. And I recommend having everything paginated to where in your cover letter you say, yeah, the government of China is, or whoever is doing this bad thing to people who are similarly situated to my client. And then you have a site that says, see page 234. And that points you to the exact page in the U.S. State Department Human Rights Report, and where you've literally highlighted with a highlighter, the two sentences that are relevant to that point. Yeah. Because, asylum officers, I'm sure, just like, the immigration services officers at the field center and like consular officers, like, they're busy, they're overworked, they're not going to like work through mountains of paper. You've got to be succinct in making your case, and then you've got to point them directly to only the most relevant parts of any supporting, documents that you want to submit.
And how many interviews would you do in a day at the asylum office?
When you do affirmative asylum, the actual like, real asylum interviews, you usually it's 2 a day. Mm-hmm. And these range from like 2 hours minimum. I would say 2.5 is probably, actually the mean is probably more like 2:45, 3 hours. But sometimes, like I had one that was like a Libyan guy that was like 7 hours, like all day. Yeah, because usually the ones that happens with are ones where there are like potential security implications, like because there's these bars to asylum that are, similar to like we call it. They're not the exact same as inadmissibilities. There's overlap, but they're not the same. But there's like, basically there's a catch-all. It's like any kind of security related risk at all. Like that's going to, anything in the testimony or in like the file or the information that the government has about the person suggests there may be a security risk. Like that's going to like take a long time to work through.
Yeah. Now, what was your impression of attorneys appearing with them at the interview, and the role of the attorney and how much you speak? Could you share us what your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Overall, my opinion is not favorable of the way that they represented clients. In addition to what I already discussed about like not making the case in writing, they also often didn't have anything of value to add at the interview. So the role of the attorney is somewhat limited in the affirmative asylum setting. As I understand it, I've never been in an interview at the field office, but as I understand it, from what I hear, there seems to be like there's more room for sort of give and take and for the attorney to talk more. In affirmative asylum, the attorney is sort of expected to sit there and not do anything until the end, unless the officer asks you, which I did. I liked to engage, and I would like readily say, "Oh, lawyer, it sounds like they're saying this, that I'm a little confused. Can you help me explain this?" But a lot of asylum officers don't want that, and they just expect the lawyer to sit there until the end, at which point the lawyer is like entitled to give brief closing remarks. And it varies by officer as to what that looks like, because the lawyer could definitely like give a short speech, little summation of like, 2 to 5 minutes of like whatever they want to say. But where it gets trickier and depends on the asylum officer is if the lawyer wants to like do more questioning about a certain issue. Some asylum officers will say, okay, attorney, you tell me what issue wasn't covered well enough or where you think there was a misunderstanding, and I'll ask your client the questions about it. Some asylum officers will say to the lawyer, okay, you ask the client questions about it, but I'm going to kind of, make sure that you're not leading too much.
Yeah.
Or like, I wouldn't do that. I would just say, tell me what you want to tell me, lawyer, and, say whatever you want. And then based on what you tell me, I might then have some follow-up questions for the applicant because, the lawyer can't testify for the applicant, but to my mind, there is an important role for them to play in clarifying and making the case. And obviously, as is the case, I'm sure at the field office, with making sure that the client's, rights are respected and that the officer is respectful. There were some issues with that. There are some officers who could be aggressive to the point of almost bullying. So there's a role for that too.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the field office is kind of the same. I have clients who might say, well, what are you going to do? I say, well, really, I'm going to sit quietly there. And my job is to just be a witness. So if things are getting out of hand, to jump in there. But if it's like a properly done case, it's good. Sometimes clients don't really understand what's going on. So, and even if you tell them, okay, we're filing an I-485, and if the officer asks, well, sometimes officers will come back and say, well, who did this on I-485? They say some technical stuff the client doesn't understand. So I try to be like, okay, could you word it a green card application, just kind of smooth things out. But my role is limited just to watch out for major kind of stuff and really calm the clients down because they're nervous, and it's having someone on your side sitting next to you, behind you, is important. But I hear that. Asylum is a weird thing. It's like a lot of times people don't have money, so it limits the amount of good representation you get, because how much time are you going to put into a case especially if you do volume asylum and the people don't have money, or like, it's just the issues with immigration practice. It's not like a rich field where people have just money to blow on, or to blow. And so, it's very interesting. So now you've made the switch. You're a private practice. I think you started 2 weeks ago to your own law firm?
About 2.5, yeah.
What's the name of your firm?
The technical name is that I incorporated under is called Manning Immigration. Mm-hmm. But I've got kind of a couple different brands, I would call them. I've got a URL for manningasylumlaw.com, which actually just went live, but I still need to put the videos into the website that are supposed to be in there. That I'm still working on. And then I've also got a manningimmigration.com URL, and I've got separate business cards for each, depending on kind of the audience, and with the idea that the Manning Immigration is sort of the catch-all for people who have no interest in asylum. But if I think someone might either be interested in asylum or in touch with populations that are, then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm Manning Asylum Law. You call my law firm, it's answered as Manning Immigration.
And you're in Houston?
Yep.
All right. So where do you do your recordings? Do you have a place you go to, or you just home, or what kind of recording do you do?
For videos, you mean?
Yeah.
I'm doing it at home. I actually started filming some quite a while back before I launched, and I do them at home. I do them in this kind of with some bookshelves behind me in the living room. I'm using my phone right now.
I've been following your Twitter for a while. You look nothing like your Twitter handle photo. So you wear glasses usually? I think from recall.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the picture has glasses.
What kind of marketing? So you do video marketing. I know you're a fellow member of the Jim Hacking's website and Facebook.
Yeah, Maximum Lawyer.
Maximum Lawyer. What is your plan of attack for marketing now?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go pretty heavy on pay-per-click. So I spent the last year or so, I spent a lot of time trying to get at least decently smart on marketing and advertising, and specifically on Facebook ads, Google search ads, Play ads, YouTube video ads. So I'm going to do all of that. I've started doing it. I'm trying to sell an online course related to tourist visas. I had some payment processing problems the first week, or otherwise that would have been a really good first week. I'm about ready to turn the ads back on for it. So hopefully it'll work.
Are you using funnels or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm using ClickFunnels. Actually, my actual, so for that thing, I'm using ClickFunnels, but I'm also the Manning Asylum Law website. If you go to it, it's actually built on ClickFunnels.
Oh,
this company in the Philippines that I found did it for me for what I think is a good price, and it looks okay. I'm not trying to win the SEO race. Like I don't like that game. I don't like how unclear like the ROI is on it. I'd rather see my return on ad spend like to the penny amount on pay per click. So I wanted websites that are like decent enough looking, but I don't care that much about like the back end. I don't need them to be that sophisticated. So I only have a placeholder up right now for the manningimmigration.com. But I'll have a real website up for it in the next week or so. But yeah, so pay per click. Right now I'm doing it by myself. I've been doing it for this tourist visa thing that I was working on. And I'm about to turn it on for my asylum law stuff because I just got the website up and I'll have the videos and have it completed in the next couple of days here. So I'm doing Google, Facebook, YouTube. I'm going to do a little bit of Avo money. I know it gets mixed reviews, but I've heard from a couple of people that it's worked really well for them for asylum.
Yeah, there's some people who just hate Avo, but Google just did they're redoing their algorithm, so Avo is going to hit hard. Like when I do searches, they come out second and third page. So, but it's not that much especially if you're doing pay-per-click. That seems like it can go out of hand really quickly. So Avo, if it's 100 to 300 a month, you're going to get inevitably you're going to get one case throughout the year. It's going to pay for all of it, so it's just added exposure. I don't have a problem with that. With regards to pay-per-click, are you going after like short-term keywords or long tail keywords? How are you programming that? Because the short-term ones, you get a bunch of clicks and it's going to skyrocket in price, especially for price competitive terms. I'm guessing for Asylum.
Asylum is not that competitive. It's not as competitive as like more generic immigration terms, which is even that's not competitive compared to other law areas like PI
or something.
But so yeah, I mean, I'm doing a little bit of. I'll be doing a little bit of both. I'm going to spend more on Facebook to kind of have a funnel where someone gets a lead magnet that's like a PDF that's about like asylum as a route to permanent legal status. And then there's like follow-up, emails and stuff, and eventually a pitch for like doing a consultation, or as I'm going to call it, a strategy session. So I'll do quite a bit of that. I have YouTube channels, one for this tourist visa thing, and then I have one that's just for asylum that I have up, and I put videos on. But I had some confusion. Like I think I screwed it up, but I'm going to get back into it and fix it. And I do plan to actually have the YouTube videos and post it on Facebook as well. Be a pretty big part of my outreach plan.
It's a lot of infrastructure investment. The YouTube pages, it just builds on itself over time. Just more you do it.
Yeah, and I've been networking super hard. I've been pounding the pavement trying to get to know folks in the industry here, and it's been paying off. My first week and a half opening my practice was like twiddling my thumbs, terrified about putting food on the table, but like things the last week have really picked up, and it's been from some of the groundwork that I laid ahead of time of getting to know folks and trying to kind of establish myself as as like, oh, that's the asylum guy in Houston. And I think I talked to you about this, John, a while back about thinking through ahead of time how I wanted to sort of brand myself, and it could be value in trying to really niche down instead of just being another one of 400 immigration lawyers in Houston, to try to be known as, oh, that's the asylum guy. Trying to kind of play to my strengths in my unique selling proposition of, oh, look, I've been on the other side of the desk. I have these insights that can be helpful to you because of that. That's still my plan. I don't know, I don't know if it's will ultimately be proven to be wise or not. But as of right now,
it's going to work out at least the cost of living and having a good lifestyle with what you're doing. Within a few months, I'd imagine, because I know how hard you're working on this stuff. I have no doubt it's going to go through. And you're open to the online stuff, the digital stuff, which so many lawyers are just fossils when it comes to that stuff. They can't even get it. So as long as you're open to testing this stuff out, you have an open mind to it, for sure it's going to work out.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the vote of confidence.
You got it, bro. It's good to know you're there. You're Texas. You know the Asylum Office there. If people listening want to consult with you or they have a case over there, even if they handle the case, they need someone to go to interview with them. So, the Asylum Offices, there's only 8 of them. So, someone's in Kansas and can't fly to Houston. You're the guy that could go.
I'm doing that. I'm covering. I covered for someone yesterday. I'm covering again on Tuesday. On Monday, I'm actually going to do 3 mock interviews for a lawyer's paying me to come do mock interviews for her clients, because I know what happens in an interview and I can make it feel about as realistic as you can possibly get, So I'm happy to do kind of contract stuff like that to try to support and, take a little bit of the asylum workload off of lawyers who don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, how could people contact you if they want to reach out?
My email address is my first name, Brian, Brian, at manningasylumlaw.com. Brian at manningasylumlaw.com. Probably the best way to find me. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and everything. I don't remember what my Twitter handle is. Email is probably the best way.
Awesome. So awesome. I'll probably have you on the show more often anyway, so they'll be hearing a lot from you. Stay on the line, but thank you so much for coming on board, and I'll have your info in the show notes.
My pleasure, John. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the show. I've listened to, I think, every single one.
Oh, wow.
So
thank you.
It's an honor to be on with you, man. I appreciate it.